So the Blackmagic Pyxis 6K is finally here. It's finally out. I've had this camera for about a week and I simply just want to share some footage with you guys and my experience and first impressions after just extensively putting this camera through a lot of different situations. I picked up this camera because I'm currently working on a documentary film and I need a second camera. I'm currently using the Red Komodo for that documentary, but unfortunately I'm having some technical issues with the camera, so I wanted to find a solid backup solution, and it just happened to be just in line and in timing with the release of this camera. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into my reasoning, but essentially I didn't want to pick up another Komodo. I didn't want to rent another Komodo, as this shoot and the days lining up just are not ideal and don't work with me being able to rent or purchase another Komodo with the price and everything. I considered the Canon C80 as well, but honestly, just what this camera offers, what this camera can do, honestly just appealed to me and my workflow a lot better. So to talk about the camera and its form factor, I actually have just a lot of experience with the Blackmagic ecosystem. My very first Blackmagic camera was that very weird, silver, ugly, unmountable box-shaped camera. I had that for a hot minute and then essentially just kind of went through just every camera in their ecosystem. I use a lot of their broadcast equipment with where I work, which is my church, and I've just used it with a variety of different cameras. So I'm very familiar again just with the ecosystem and how these cameras work. I really love just the sensor, the image that comes out of them, and just the overall workflow and ease of use with Blackmagic RAW or ProRes, of which this camera does not have, and just finding out something that just works for me. So let's get this out the way. Obviously, the box style form factor was what appealed to me the most and even made me consider this camera. The only other Blackmagic camera that I have currently is the Pocket 6K G2, the one with the ND filter, so not the full frame. I've never gotten the opportunity to test that out and just see what that sensor can produce. But this form factor just appealed to me. It's a lot more riggable. It's a lot more flexible in terms of just like how I operate cameras and how I like to operate cameras, especially more recently coming from the Red Komodo and just getting that as my first kind of full-on box style, rig it up how you need to camera. This thing and the experience I've had with it so far is absolutely amazing. The functionality and just the use of better inputs is also something that just really appealed to me with this camera. Being able to have professional inputs such as SDI, a more professional SDI port 4 timecode is beautiful as well. And then also just having multiple USB inputs and outputs, XLR, and then just the BPU ecosystem of batteries. It's a lot better than the previous things that I've had experience using, which is the Sony NPF and then HDMI, which just comes with the, those own problems. The recording formats in this camera are also a lot more vast. Again, I didn't have any experience with the camera just before this one, the Blackmagic 6K full frame. So being able to just jump into this camera and see just all the different 6K formats, 4K formats, anamorphic formats, is just really good. It's really flexible, and in my opinion, it's also a lot better than what I get in my Red Komodo OG. And being able to switch between those formats and switch settings in the camera is a lot faster, obviously, than just the infamy of the Red Komodo and that workflow. So that's really cool. That's really awesome. That just speeds up my workflow even more. And then one of the last factors of me purchasing this camera was the use of CF Express cards. I'm currently using the 1TB Angelbird card, and honestly I just really love that. That's enough for most of the shoots I do. I'm never shooting in just like the highest quality format, so I don't run out of space really quick. I'm keeping everything in 8:1 compression, and that just seems to work perfectly fine for my needs and where I upload stuff and where things go. And honestly, I can probably drop down to 12:1 and still be perfectly fine with the way we kind of just distribute media these days. But switching over to CF Express Type B versus the CFast 2.0 is just so much better. Such a faster, cleaner workflow. CFast is extremely expensive to buy, but CF Express Type V is actually very affordable. So I'm going to be using this camera in a variety of situations, mainly in a broadcast environment, again, as I work at my church full time and just do broadcast there, as well as just other video production stuff, social media content, commercial work, documentary work. It's gonna definitely get put, through its paces, and having that 6K open gate factor is just really nice to be able to just have that flexibility when it comes to post and how I want to distribute whatever content that I create with this camera. Before we jump into the next section, one thing that I am going to add to this camera is the external monitor when that releases, but I found out that technically you can use the USB port on the front of this camera if you have specifically a monitor that can do 1080p 60. So the Blackmagic Video Assist and the Atomos Ninja 5, those can receive a 1080p 60 signal. So technically you can get a signal out of here, but obviously you cannot operate the camera. So you'll need Blackmagic's monitor to just have an additional option to operate the camera. So let's talk about the image. So we know that these days, pretty much every single camera that you can buy, no matter if it's a mirrorless camera or a cinema camera, produce absolutely amazing images. If you can't get a good image out of your camera, it's the operator problem. Again, I never used the original football design 6K, so I don't have experience with this specific sensor, but after using it for a week and just putting it in a variety of different situations, I'm extremely impressed with it, especially coming from my Red Komodo. Before my Red Komodo, I used my Lumix S5 II, the Sony FX3, and just, a variety of different cameras. But coming to the sensor, I'm just glad to see, that usual great looking Blackmagic image out of the sensor. Obviously, if people don't know, Blackmagic designs the world leading color grading software, so you'd imagine they know color science, and honestly just how to make a great looking sensor. But overall, the images that are coming out of this camera, color grading them and working with the files in post is absolutely amazing, and they're extremely flexible. The main thing with exposing most cameras these days, and honestly just with this camera specifically, is understanding just how to expose the image. If you understand ISO and you understand the flexibility that it gives you to add to your image, and then you have a solid set of NDs, you can really just push this camera to get an amazing looking image out of it. In terms of comparison of this image to the Blackmagic 6K G2 with the ND filters, I do think that there is a slight difference in the colors, and it's pretty noticeable, especially when you have the images side by side. But it's nothing too dramatic to where if you're intercutting those two cameras, you would quickly be able to tell, which camera is which. Again, with most color grading tools these days, you can make things look fairly similar, but I do prefer the look and the image that I'm getting out of the 6K full frame sensor. So let's talk about audio and timecode, which is another reason that I invested into this system. Timecode and 32-bit flow audio is such a big part of my workflow nowadays. I mainly get my 32-bit flow audio through external devices such as the DJI Mic 2s or the Tascam FR AV2, but I wish, most cameras could do 32-bit flow. I don't know how much that would add to cameras price-wise, or how much it would make the camera bigger, but they are just an absolute amazing solution these days. When it comes to the Pyxis, there is 3 ways that you can jam timecode into the camera, which is really good because essentially you just have backup sources, especially if you don't have the right type of cords for timecode. So we have the XLR, which you can jam timecode through that. Up front, you have the line-in mic input in the back, and then you have the BNC connection on the back, and all 3 of those will work to get timecode into your camera. You can also do this on the pocket line of cameras just by going through the line-in port or the XLR port, which is really nice and really convenient. As far as internal audio in this camera, it's actually really amazing and a lot more usable in my opinion versus the previous Blackmagic cameras. Again, I don't have experience with the 6K full frame, but the preamps seem to be absolutely amazing. So listen to this test. All right, so this is just a quick and dirty audio test. Right now I have the Rode Shotgun NTG going into the 3.5 millimeter jack on the Pyxis 6K, and then I have my Sennheiser MKE 600 going into the Pyxis through XLR as well, so it's providing phantom power. And this is how these mics sound. Now, do take note that they are not pointed directly at me. They're kind of going towards like my forehead, top of my head here. But this is how the audio sounds straight out of camera. Now we're going to hook up our DJI lavs and see how it just sounds with the preamps from the camera in this system. And just for reference, this is on the Pocket 6K Pro with the ND filters, because I don't know the difference between all the different 6Ks now. So this is not the full frame one, but all of the audio is at the same exact settings with the same exact mic, Sennheiser MKE 600, recording directly through the XLR phantom power. This is just the preamp audio quality that you get through this camera. All right, so now I'm on a lav mic on the DJI Mic 2, and it's going straight into the Pyxis 6K. I absolutely love these mics for just everyday kind of YouTube vlogging, you know, run and gun type stuff for content creation. But I also love this, and the recorder that I want to talk to you about that I also am going to test out is the Tascam FR AV2. I love both of these because they have 32-bit float audio. Now, what is coming out of the Pyxis sounds amazing and is like really great, especially if you're in a pinch and you don't have time to set up an external audio source. What you get from the Pyxis is great. It's good enough. But once you experience 32-bit float audio and even better are able to implement timecode into that 32-bit float workflow, things just get even better. We all know sound is important. It's the most important thing. And so I honestly just want to take that small extra step to get the best sound possible. And this last example is from the Tascam FR AV2. Now, this recorder is brand new as well, and I will definitely do a video on just my audio setup, importance of audio, and just how I go about capturing audio on any given video situation. But for now, this is just to give you an example comparison of the audio coming from the Tascam FR AV2 versus the internal of the Pyxis 6K. Another reason why I love this recorder is because of how I can attach it to my rig and have a very small and nimble setup for run and gun type work. All that said, I really do love the flexibility of 32-bit float audio and being able to just time code jam sync across all my devices and easily sync up all this in post. So the last thing I want to talk about is the riggability of this camera. I honestly haven't settled with a cage system for this camera yet because I'm just extremely picky with what I want to do with it. I think for the most part, I want to go with an 8-sin side plate and then a shape top plate because it just seems like it has the most flexibility for what I want to do with this camera and how I want to rig this camera. It has a lot of the RE safety pin ports on the top of the plate, and so that gives me options to just more securely put things on top of the camera if I need to. And the 8-sin side plate is really nice because it has NATO rail and just a little bit more flexibility than I'm seeing from some of the other companies when it comes to rigging up this camera. Right now I technically kind of just have this thing Frankenstein rigged with parts from all my other cameras. I actually took the rigid pro plate off of my Lumix S5 II, and I'm currently using that as the top plate for the camera, and it's actually working really well, a lot better than I expected. I just wish it was a little bigger. So if Rigid Pro, you guys for some reason are watching this video, if you could design a plate that's just almost like this but just has more RE locking pin locations and a little wider, that'd be really nice. On the bottom here, I'm actually using the DSLR video shooter, his first iteration of the V-mount for mirrorless cameras onto this. It actually works really well. The main thing is that you just don't want to block the SDI ports on the back, so I kind of just have this base plate, mounted into the camera as far back as I can so that I still have access to those ports. But ideally, I just want to be able to find a V-mount solution for when I need it, that I can plug in multiple DTAP batteries and just not have anything in the way of any other accessory that I need to mount onto the camera. And then lastly, I just have the Condor Blue side trigger handle on the side here, which is really great. I use it on my Red Komodo, but I do wish there's a handle that I could use to record or trigger recording on this camera, because that's the one problem I have with this camera, is that there's only one record button on the side here. It'd be nice to just have something on the handle right here, or just somewhere on the other side of the camera that I can tap to start and stop a recording. I do want to mention, for people who have not experienced a camera with an SDI port, SDI protocol is very much a thing. I know a lot of people know about it with the Red Komodo system, and it's extremely simple. Power everything up, the SDI is the last to go in, and before you power everything out, the SDI is the first to come out. So last in, first out. So I'm going to do a full review on this camera in the near future after I get more projects and more experience with this camera under my belt and really just put it more through its paces. But the more and more I pick this camera up, and every single time I use it, I'm just falling more and more in love with it and falling back in love with the Blackmagic workflow for posts and everything. So definitely hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video, and please subscribe, as I have so much more content with this camera and just filmmaking stuff in general coming. Thank you guys for watching.